It didn't begin with a dusty manuscript or a secret diary locked in a vault. It began with a farmhouse, a place of absolute silence, standing alone in the cold Wisconsin soil. On November 16, 1957, when police first stepped across that threshold, they believed they were entering the home of a man. They were wrong. The official story, the one they gave the world, was simple: insanity, a term used to file away the horror, to label it, and to forget it. But what if insanity isn't an explanation? What if it's a destination, a place a soul can choose to travel to? What if the key to unlocking this horror wasn't found in a detective's notebook from 1957, but in the cryptic readings of a man who had already died 12 years earlier? Edgar Cayce, the Sleeping Prophet. His life's work, seen in retrospect, doesn't just describe a theory of the soul, it provides the only spiritual framework capable of containing a horror like Ed Gein. It's as if he wrote the diagnosis before the world had discovered the disease. Inside that farmhouse was a confession, not written in ink, but in bone and skin. A physical transcript of a soul deliberately dismantling its own humanity. Cayce's teachings suggest this was not just a violation of human law, but of cosmic law. Gein wasn't just satisfying a compulsion, he was feeding an ancient archetype, the beast in the cellar of the human psyche. The evidence on that farm doesn't just ask what he did, it forces us to use the prophetic lens of Edgar Cayce to ask a more dangerous question. What did he become? And what terrible cosmic price is paid for a soul that chooses to become a monster? To the world, Ed Gein was a footnote in the Encyclopedia of Monsters, the quiet man from Plainfield, a mask so convincing that no one saw the abyss behind the eyes. That mask was a shroud, woven by the ghost that haunted him, his mother, Augusta. He was consumed by the archetype of the terrible mother, the devouring goddess who grants life only to demand it back. His farmhouse was not a home, it was an altar where he served as the lone captive priest. Psychology can describe this, but to truly understand it, we must apply a lens that sees beyond the mind into the soul's journey itself. This is the lens left behind by Edgar Cayce. He was a spiritual cartographer, and his work provides a map for even the most twisted of souls. Where the world saw a killer, the framework of Cayce's wisdom reveals a failed alchemist, a man desperately trying to piece together a broken goddess from the flesh of others. This was an alchemy in reverse. He took what was sacred, the human form, and sought to transmute it downwards back into inert objects. He wasn't trying to liberate the spirit from matter. He was trying to prove that only matter existed. This is the ultimate Orphic tragedy. The mystics taught that the human soul contains two natures, one divine, one titanic. The purpose of life is to purify the soul, to remember its divine origin. Gein represents the ultimate refusal of this journey. He turned his back on the heavens and chose to embrace the hungry earth. This is why applying Cayce's philosophy is so crucial. A psychologist sees a broken mind, but through Cayce's lens, we see a soul committing treason against itself, a deliberate ritualistic act of self-erasure, choosing the bondage of the flesh over the freedom of the spirit. This archetype, the terrible mother, is not just a psychological complex, it is a primordial power. She is the Gorgon who turns men to stone, the dark goddess Kali wearing a necklace of skulls. She represents the raw, untamed, devouring aspect of nature that gives birth and then consumes. Gein did not just fail to separate from his mother, he became the high priest of this ancient destructive force, sacrificing his own identity on her altar. His work in that farmhouse was a perverse mockery of a sacred process. True alchemy seeks to elevate, to transmute the lead of the lower self into the gold of enlightened consciousness. Gein performed an alchemy in reverse. He took what was sacred, the human form, and sought to transmute it downwards, back into inert, powerless objects. This is the ultimate Orphic tragedy. The ancient mystics taught that the human soul contains two natures, one divine and one titanic. The purpose of life's journey is to purify the soul and transcend its baser instincts. Gein represents the ultimate refusal of this journey. He willingly fed his divine spark to the ravenous, primal hunger of the Titan within. This is why applying Cayce's framework is so crucial and so terrifying. A psychologist sees a broken mind, but the principles Cayce outlined reveal a soul committing treason against itself, a deliberate, ritualistic act of self-erasure. When the soul leaves the body, the first encounter is not with a judge, it is with the truth. Edgar Cayce's readings consistently described a life reading, where the soul is forced to experience a perfect, unfiltered reflection of its life. But when we apply this cosmic law to a soul like Ed Gein, a unique and specific horror emerges. A justice so precise it feels personally engineered. He would not just feel the terror of his victims. His crime was deeper. His sin was profanation. He saw people as raw material. He reduced the sacred vessel of a soul to mere objects, and so his eternity begins by experiencing that state of being. Cayce's teachings on karmic reflection describe a law that, when applied to Gein, suggests a soul temporarily fused with the memory of its own desecration. He would be forced to experience the state of non-being he inflicted, to feel what it is to be a lampshade, aware, conscious, yet stripped of all identity, existing only as a piece of furniture in a decaying farmhouse. He would feel what it is to be a bowl made from a skull, a silent, screaming witness to his madness. He would become the skin stretched into a mask, feeling the suffocating darkness, the loss of face, the ultimate erasure of self. This is not a punishment of fire. It is a punishment of consciousness itself. A soul that denied the sanctity of others is forced to experience its own consciousness, trapped within the objects of its profanation. What if the goal of life isn't to find the answers, but to learn how to live with the questions? The question this forces upon us is terrifying. If a soul can be made to feel like an object, does a part of it forget how to be a person? This is the first stage of a terrible cosmic law. An eye for an eye, but on the level of being itself. This experience transcends mere empathy. It's a forced lesson in the Orphic mysteries, inverted and made monstrous. The ancient Greeks told stories of gods punishing mortals by transforming them. King Lycaon, for his arrogance and cannibalism, was turned into a wolf, his outer form now matching his inner nature. Arachne, for her pride, was turned into a spider, doomed to weave forever. These weren't just cautionary tales. They were symbolic maps of cosmic justice. They warned that if you act like a beast, you become the beast. Gein's initial after-death experience is a modern version of this ancient law. He is not turned into an animal, not yet. He is turned into something far worse, dead matter. He worshipped the raw material of the body, and so his consciousness is temporarily imprisoned within it. He is forced to confront the ultimate consequence of materialism. He wanted to prove that humans are just meat, and the universe responds by saying, fine, then feel what it is to be just meat, forever. This is also a journey into the darkest corner of the Jungian psyche, the realm of the undifferentiated shadow. By reducing others to objects, he severed their connection to the collective human experience. As a result, his own soul is quarantined. It is locked in a state of absolute objectification, unable to connect with any other consciousness. It is the ultimate solitary confinement, a universe of one, populated only by the dead things he created and the screaming awareness that he is now one of them. This state is designed to teach a single, brutal lesson, the lesson that consciousness is not a possession, it is a relationship, a sacred pact between all living things. And when you break that pact by treating another conscious being as an inanimate object, you don't just kill them. You begin the process of killing the very thing within yourself that allows you to be human. What happens to a soul so thoroughly marinated in its own horror? The answer, derived from the cosmic laws Edgar Cayce's work laid out, is both a prophecy and a warning for our time. This is where the true long-term consequence begins. This is the law of bestialization. This framework suggests that the universe does not waste a divine spark on a soul that has so violently rejected its own divinity. A consciousness that has willingly descended to the level of pure predatory instinct, a consciousness that fed the titan within until it starved the man, loses the privilege of a complex human incarnation. So how does this manifest in your life? It translates into a practice of radical empathy, not as a moral platitude, but as a spiritual survival strategy. The application is devastatingly simple. Every time you objectify another person, you're taking a small step on the path that Gein walked to its conclusion. The antidote is to consciously inject humanity back into the equation, to see the soul behind the eyes of the other. The principles Cayce described predict a specific karmic trajectory. The soul of a Gein is cast back into the wheel of life, but at a lower rung. It is born into a form that mirrors its last state of consciousness, brutal, instinctual, and devoid of self-awareness. Picture a soul that once held a human mind, now trapped in the body of a hyena. Its existence is reduced to the gnawing ache of hunger and the constant fear of being hunted. There is no memory of Gein. There is only the endless, screaming present of instinct. This is not a single lifetime. It is a cycle. For centuries, the fragmented consciousness might reincarnate through countless forms of predators and prey. A life as a deep-sea creature in the crushing dark. A life as a venomous insect. Each life is a perfect echo of the archetype he chose to embody. He who saw others as meat is now just meat. This is the practical application of that ancient Orphic wisdom. The titanic nature, once unleashed, must exhaust itself. The warning for our time is this. The path of dehumanization is a slippery slope. Gein is not an anomaly. He is a destination. And the universal laws described by visionaries like Casey have a place for souls who choose that destination. The framework Edgar Casey left behind is more than a collection of readings. It's a spiritual engine, a set of cosmic laws that, once understood, can be applied to any soul, in any era. So let us conduct a terrifying thought experiment. Let us take this engine, this Caseian model of karma and consciousness, and apply it to the case of Gein. Let us, here and now, ask the question that no one could have asked Casey while he was alive, a final, terrible question. The model details the brutal, instinctual cycles of his karmic path. But if we push the model to its absolute limit, if we follow its logic into the deepest part of the abyss, we must ask, beneath the layers of instinct, beneath the archetype of the beast he fed, what remains of the individual soul of Edward Gein? What is at its core? When you run this simulation, the Caseian framework doesn't offer a comforting answer. It doesn't speak of a tortured spirit waiting for redemption. The logical conclusion of his actions, filtered through these cosmic laws, is a chilling silence, a void, an answer that forms itself not from a quote, but from the terrifying negative space in his philosophy. From that silence, a whisper of a conclusion emerges, 3 words that represent the final state of a soul that has committed the ultimate treason against itself. Just the appetite. Think about that. The logical endpoint of Gein's journey, according to this spiritual map, is not eternal punishment. It is utter annihilation of the self. The man is gone. The soul, as a cohesive, self-aware entity, has been completely consumed from within. All that remains is the raw, undifferentiated hunger he spent his life feeding. The Titan has not just defeated the man, it has devoured him entirely. This is the most terrifying possibility within the Caseian cosmology, that a soul can, through its own choices, be unmade. It ceases to be a noun and becomes a verb, no longer a being, but a state of wanting. It seems the oldest advice in the world is to know thyself. Funny how that's still the hardest final boss to beat. The case of Gein suggests that if you fail, the alternative isn't just ignorance, it's annihilation. This conclusion, derived from the logic of Casey's own principles, is far more frightening than any religious vision of hell. Hell, at least, implies the continued existence of a self. There is an I that is being punished. Hell is a state of eternal consequence for a soul. The outcome predicted here is far more absolute, the degradation of the soul into a base function. It is a spiritual entropy, the complex structure of a self-aware consciousness collapsing under the weight of its own darkness until it reverts to a single primitive algorithm: consume. Imagine your consciousness as a vast library containing the story of you. The horror of Gein's state is the image of that library's books having their words magically erased, leaving only blank pages. The structure remains, but the story is gone. The potential for meaning has been annihilated by the soul's own choices. This is the ultimate victory of the Titan. The Orphic Titan dismembered the divine god Zagreus, representing the fragmentation of the cosmic soul. Gein's journey was a reenactment of this myth from the inside out. He ritually dismembered others, and in doing so, his own soul suffered the same fate. The final chilling implication is this: perhaps the most untouchable mystery is not what happens after we die, but what we can become before we die. We believe we are in control, but the case of Gein serves as a terrifying monument to the idea that there are forces within us that, if fed, do not just want to take control, they want to erase the controller. Why isn't this story taught? Why isn't the cautionary tale of Gein framed in these cosmic, spiritual terms? The answer is simple. It is far too terrifying, and it places a burden of responsibility squarely on our shoulders. The modern world has a powerful mechanism for dealing with a horror like Gein: the diagnosis. We label it psychosis, schizophrenia, necrophilia. We file it away in the sterile cabinets of psychology and criminology. These labels are a form of exorcism. They create a safe distance between us and him. He was sick, broken, an anomaly of the brain. We are healthy. We are whole. We are safe. This is the Great Suppression. The quiet, unspoken agreement to reduce the metaphysical to the psychological. It's a comfortable lie that protects us from a devastating truth that the capacity for this kind of evil is not a disease. It is a potential. It is a dormant seed within the soil of the human psyche itself. The teachings of Casey, the wisdom of the Orphic myths, the maps of the soul drawn by Carl Jung, they all suggest that the monster is not an invader from the outside. It is a citizen of the inner world. The archetype of the beast, the devouring titan, is not Gein's personal demon. It is a fundamental component of the collective unconscious. It is in all of us. This is the secret that has been systematically hidden, not by a shadowy cabal, but by our own collective desire for comfort. The idea of a karmic cycle that can lead to spiritual self-annihilation is infinitely more disturbing than a chemical imbalance in the brain. It implies that every moral choice, every thought, every action has an eternal weight. It suggests that we are the architects of our own heaven and the engineers of our own disintegration. The legacy of Gein's farmhouse is not just the inspiration for horror movies. It is a permanent scar on the landscape of what we thought it meant to be human. Legend has it that after the horrors were discovered, locals burned the house to the ground, trying to erase the stain from their town. But you cannot destroy an idea by burning a building. The story was suppressed because it is not about him. It is about us. It is a mirror, and looking into it means we might see a flicker of the same darkness in our own reflection. Official science, of course, denies everything, but the soul remembers what the mind is trained to forget. And what if the ultimate suppression is the one that happens inside when we refuse to look at our own shadow? The story of Ed Gein is not a ghost story told around a campfire. It is a lesson in cosmic mechanics, a warning etched into the fabric of reality itself. It teaches us that the soul is not a static object. It is a process. It is a garden, and it requires constant tending. If you plant seeds of empathy, of connection, of recognizing the sacred in others, the garden blooms. But if you plant seeds of objectification, of cruelty, of apathy, if you feed the weeds of the shadow, the garden will be consumed. The titan will rise and devour the gardener. Now that you know this, you are no longer the person you were before. You have looked into the abyss, and the abyss has looked back. You understand that every interaction, every thought, is a choice between alchemy and its dark reflection, between building your soul up or letting it be unmade. This knowledge is a heavy burden, but it is also a powerful shield. It is the ultimate tool for navigating the labyrinth of your own inner world. If this material has touched something deep within you, if it has resonated not with your mind, but with your soul, leave a like. Not for the algorithms, but as a quiet signal to the universe, a personal declaration: I am awake. I will tend to my garden. Subscribe if you are ready to journey further into these forbidden territories of the soul. There are more maps to read, more mysteries to uncover. Share this with those you feel are ready to hear it. Because in a world that constantly encourages us to see each other as labels, as obstacles, as things, the most radical act is to see the soul. The time has come to remember that.